Introduce yourself.
Jim Gordon.
Can you say my name is?
My name is Jim Gordon, former mayor of the city of Greater Sudbury. Well, I think it probably, look, what drives us is our values. And when I was a boy growing up, my father, Jim Gordon, was a man who worked very diligently for a number of mining companies. He was a graduate of the School of Mines, Haileybury. And he came over with his father, mother, brother, sister, just before the First World War from England. And they came to Canada because great Uncle Willie, who had just happened to become my hero, and I looked up to him very much throughout my lifetime, had been after my father's.
Sorry, can you stop for a second? It's just, there's a lot of. Picks up a lot of that.
Start again?
I got the first bit, just kind of.
I can pick it up if
Okay.
you want.
Yeah, go.
Uncle Willie Martin, his last name was Martin, Will Martin, who had served in the Boer War, also fought in the First World War, and he kept after my grandfather to come to Canada. Bring your family, Jim, because he said, you'll never get ahead over here in England. Ironically, they lived in a town called Widnes, and Widnes was the chemical hellhole, sinkhole of Great Britain. Little did I know, or they know, that someday they would live in a city that had a name that was not as favorable in some respects, but we can talk about that later on. Anyway, Will convinced my grandfather to come to Canada. So he came to Canada, and like a lot of immigrants, once they get off the boat, they have no money, and they just had enough money to get up to Cobalt. And he began working in the mill there. But what came out of that story of my great uncle in particular was the fact that he'd been in the Boer War and that he had fought in the First World War, and he'd been also the reeve of Coleman Township for over 25 years. He was the kind of man who was still playing soccer when he was in his 50s on a team. And he was just a go-get-it, get things done kind of person. And he had a quality that I liked a great deal, is he was very jovial. He could meet people really well, and it was always with a smile and with a chuckle and so forth. My father was like that as well. My father was a man who was more taciturn than my great Uncle Willie, but he was also very well read. And even back in the days when nobody was talking about China, he would tell my mother that someday China would be a major power in the world, and when it opened up, then the economy of the world would change. This is a man, this is back in the 40s, okay? So, to finish, they eventually moved to Sudbury. And my father married Mamie Kilby, and my mother. And my mother was also very tenacious, and she had a strong sense of social justice. My father was more of a company man. My mother was a social justice woman. And it was really from her thoughts and influence that I think I came to be a person who was a strong believer in social justice. When I went to university, I attended a Catholic university in Windsor. It was called Assumption. It became the University of Windsor shortly after I graduated. But I also was schooled by a priest by the name of Father Garvey, who was a good friend of Walter Reuther, as you know, who was the president of A&W, the former auto workers. And Father Garvey really drilled in the idea that, you know, there was, in this world, there was more injustice than justice for ordinary people. And I believed that. I could see it when I grew up as a teenager, and I had no illusions about, later when I became mayor, I had no illusions about who ran Sudbury and all the towns and the people around it. Now, just to close the circle on that, because we talked about values, up till the time I was mayor of Sudbury, Sudbury was still largely a company town. They used to talk about, you know, Coppercliff and Garson and Levack as being company towns. Sudbury, because more of the people lived away from the company didn't own their houses. As a result, Sudbury was a freer place. But the leaders in Sudbury, the Chamber of Commerce, and the mayor and council largely danced to the tune of the company. When I became mayor, they didn't know it, but that wasn't Jim Gordon. My first meeting with the company occurred in the late spring of the first year I was mayor, which would have been 1976. And what had happened was I'd gone out to see Ron Taylor, because he's the president, and to talk to him. And the reason I'd gone out to talk to him was because we had found that the Stanley Stadium that they'd given to the city about 6 months before had a roof that was no longer viable. And the province was insisting we had to fix it at our own expense. The province was ready to put up a little bit of money, but I thought that Inco, who had given it to us, they should put up some money too. It was a gift that wasn't really a gift. So I went out, and it was a sort of not a very nice day. And on the way out, I couldn't help but notice that the snow had left the area, and there was that yellow-brown earth everywhere around Coppercliff. And I noticed on the road that there was no trees, no leaves, and any trees that were there were mere shrubs. And it was not a very pleasant appearance or a pleasant day to be driving in Coppercliff. Anyway, I went up to his office, was ushered in, and there were two men in the office, and one, of course, was the president, Ron Taylor. And so sat down and we began to have a conversation. So I told him why I'd come out. I'd like them to participate in taking care of that roof. And he looked at me. He said, "Well, Mayor," he said, "you're a big boy." He said, "You people now have regional government, and you're a city. You're big enough to take care of yourself and to take care of matters like this." No. I got up, and there were curtains across the windows. So the room was semi-dark, in semi-darkness. I walked over to the curtains, and I threw open the curtains, and I said, "You did this. You owe us. I expect that you're going to provide money." And I left. That was it.
Welcome.
Okay? Welcome to the mayor.
Jim, speaking of how it was, in the right around where you were, soon after you were elected mayor, there were huge layoffs that were about to come.
5,000 people were laid off.
There was a strike that was to come, and there was an organization called Sudbury 2001, which you were very much a part of.
That's right.
And I think many of us would have thought that that's where the way we work together began to change. How do you, what was your role? Why did you support it as strongly as you did? And what are some of your thoughts there?
Well, I supported it as strongly as I did because I believed that the only way that Sudbury was going to...
I need you to say, I supported 2001. This
Oh.
is on, yeah.
Okay. Uh, well, I supported 2001 because this was the only game in town. We just been told that 5,000 workers were going to go down the road, and there were going to be even more changes going forward. And the leaders who came to talk to me about it, people like Michael Atkins, Narsum Qatari, were the key proponents of this going ahead with this, not the municipality. The municipality got in as a result of ordinary citizens coming forward and saying, look, we have to find a way to be open to the world if we're going to be successful down the road as a community. I bought into that because I knew we were a mining town. I knew that, well, we saw it. They were laying off all these people. There was a great deal of unhappiness with what was going on, and it was time for a change, a time for a new attitude in the city.
Jim, some of the projects that came to fruition, it was a little bit later, but are the regreening project, some of the alternative energy projects. I remember flying with you at, I don't know if it was Vermont, to look at a quadractor.
We went to Vermont.
A lot happened, but a lot has to go through the mayor's office. What are some of the projects, some of your activism that brought some of these new things to fruition at the city, with the city?
Oh, well, that's well, let me put it this way. The city was thrown into a real cesspool, or a real area of great turbulence. Despite the fact that we had 2001, almost within a matter of months, in 1977, we had a major strike. We had the longest strike of workers in the mineral field that this country had ever seen. That drove the community further down. I can remember going down LaSalle Boulevard, which is the major artery in this city, on a weekend, where most times before the strike, there would be all kinds of cars on the road heading for or coming from the new Sudbury Shopping Centre, which was a huge mall. There was hardly anybody on the street. So what happened was the Ministerial Association and the company decided that they would move their approach to how life should happen by calling for a prayer meeting. And they held the prayer meeting downtown in the Holiday Inn, and I can recall quite distinctly. Father Van Berkel called my office and said he expected that I would be there at that meeting for the prayers. He expected it. And I said to Daisy Smith, well, I'm not going. They don't tell me what to do. But then I thought it over. I thought, wait a minute. This might be a moment for the mayor to finally step out of the shadows, because the strike had been on for 6 months, way too long, and I could see what was happening in the city. I could see the suffering of families. People were losing their homes. People didn't have enough to eat. They were living off food banks. There was a lot of despair and unhappiness. I'm going to go. So I sat down and I wrote a prayer. And then I went to the meeting. I got up on the stage. Wint Newmans, who was the president of INCO at that time, is sitting down in the audience. So was Patterson, the head of the union. And I read my prayer. And essentially what the prayer said was that the strike had been going on too long. It was breaking the back of the people, and it was breaking the back of the community, and that someday the board of directors of INCO were going to have to talk to St. Peter and justify what they did and they weren't going to be successful. Well, it just blew the room apart. It was on the national news that night, okay? And I did that deliberately because when I was first mayor, I got a call. I was teaching at that time. I got a call from Daisy Smith, Daisy Sylvester. And Daisy had been the mayor's secretary for years. She was the mayor, secretary to the Bill Ellis, Edgar, Silverman, Fabro, all of them. And she was a mentor to me. And she told me one thing in particular when I was mayor. She said, Jim, you now are the father of this city. The mayor is the father. You have a responsibility. This is your family. That was her attitude. And you know, I didn't really buy into it in the beginning. But when that strike came along, I realized that I had a responsibility as the mayor, the leader of the community, the person who'd been elected by the community, and the person who had to stand up for this community. And that's what happened. The strike was over, as you know, a few short months later. But, so here we were. I recall sitting down with a publisher of a local paper. And the publisher said, we had lunch at the Peter Piper. And we had a long conversation. And I can remember the publisher saying, in his view, this town was finished unless something more happened. But it was very, very bleak. So we got to work, okay? We got to work. We began to put together projects, and the projects that had been put together, the attitude that had been developed through 2001, it was more the attitude that came out of 2001 than it was the projects. But so here we were in the 80s. We were still in the doldrums when it came to attracting more businesses to Sudbury. The only thing we were able to attract came from Bill Davis, who happened at that time to be the premier of the province, and he saw to it that there was a provincial building built in Sudbury. But as far as more businesses, it just wasn't part of the cards, all right? So what did I do? You know, I had quite a family, eh? I have 6 daughters, and they were quite young then. And from the time I was a boy, I had thought that I would like to be an MPP. And I was going to do that. And what happened was, I went to see George Lund, who was the chairman of the region at that time. This was about 1980. And I said to George, you know, George, you're really well known and popular. And I said, I'm popular as the mayor, but you know, we're both conservatives. We should talk to the party in Toronto about running a poll to see who could win, okay? Because what had happened, I had called Dave Patterson about things in the city. This was in that period of time. And I said, I guess the NDP will be all back again. He said, no, Jim, they're not. They're not coming back. And German's not coming back. He was the NDP member. And so I thought, well, who's going to run? I said, and he said, furthermore, he said, George Lund is going to be the next Tory MPP. Well, I thought, what? So I waited after I talked to George, and we agreed we'd get this poll. Months went by, and then about 2 weeks before the nomination, still no poll, and George had officially announced he was going to run. So I didn't say anything to anybody. 2 weeks before, I called my brother, John, and I said, Johnny, I'm going to run. And I called the local leaders of the ethnic groups in the city who I had cultivated over the years. And I said, I'm going to run. I know you're not conservative, but I said, this city has to have a change. And if we're going to get things for Sudbury, we've got to do it this way. Would you come out to the nomination meeting? And they agreed. And the story, as you know, is that I was elected the MPP for Sudbury. That's when we began to get, from my perspective, that's when I really found I could really do things for Sudbury.
So Jim, let's, this kind of advocacy, what did you accomplish in that period of time?
All right. Well, let's start with there were two major projects at that time in my mind when I went to Queen's Park. The first was the fact that we all said, and we all knew, that if this community was going to go ahead, we had to produce mining machinery in this community. We had to do that. We had to have something that was, because what was happening, the mining machinery that the men were using and the parts they were using were coming from all around the world. They were coming from other countries, but they weren't coming from Sudbury. And yet this was the hive, eh? And this was always our dream. The dream was that somehow or other we should be either able to refine the ore, improve the ore, make products out of the ore, and or have a mining machinery. So, if you recall, to give them their due, the three NDP members in Sudbury had always been very vociferous around the point of view that mining machinery and parts and the repair of should happen within the Sudbury region. They were very vociferous about that, but they couldn't deliver. So I went to see Gordon Walker, who at that time was the Minister of Industry, sat down with him and said, look, we have to have mining machinery being built in Sudbury. We need some help, some industry help. So what he came up with was the idea of a board called the Ontario Mining Machinery Board. It's got an official name which escapes me now. And he put, so the Premier put Mike Harris, who was my seatmate in the legislature, and myself on the board, along with Darrell Lake and one other individual, I forget now. Within a matter of months, a grant was given to Inco, who became Curluck. Walter Curluck was on the board. And Walter Curluck, as you know, was at a period of time a president of Inco. And through his drive and his imagination, he heard what we were saying. Inco began to produce mining machinery, which, as you know, they later sold to another company that went on to be extremely successful. And out of that came other companies as well that produced mining machinery parts and machines. That's the first thing. So that's number one. Where does it start? It starts with getting a member. I remember when we had the 2001 conference. After the conference, we all went down and visited Premier Davis in his office. And when they said, well, you know, we need help, I said, we need help. Doug Frith, who is the regional chairman, said, we need help. And he said, gentlemen, he sat back with his pipe. He said, send me a member. Who do you think was the member? I went down as a member. I knew damn well what I was going to do. I was going to work very hard on finding a way to get projects that would fit in Sudbury. That was the first. The second, though, during the election campaign, and we had the election office was in the old Loblaw building on the corner of Frood Road and Elm Street, next to the tracks. One day, Gary Ross, who worked for Xerox, top salesperson, who was my campaign manager, wonderful man, he's deceased now. He called me, he said, Maureen Lacroix wants to talk to you, and Mo Lacerte from the health unit. I said, well, what do they want? He says, they want to talk to you about a cancer treatment center. I said, well, Gary, I'm in the middle of an election campaign. I got to get elected. I can't meet them now. So they should have come and seen me before I got, I was the mayor. They could have come and seen me in my office. But right now I got to get elected. So I pushed them off. And then he called me again about 3 or 4 days. Jim, you got to see them. You got to see them. So I went down to the office and down there, and we sat there across the table, and that's when Maureen explained and began to educate me about cancer, because she'd been involved for some time with the cancer situation as a volunteer. And I knew next to nothing about cancer at that time. I was so ignorant about how it was all handled, because we didn't have the numbers that we have today with cancer in the North. Then it was remarkably, it would be about 10, maybe 20% of what we have today. I even said to her, and I am embarrassed by it in a sense at that time, I said, what's a cancer treatment center? So she told me. So I get down to Toronto and I get working on it right away, because I figure I'm there to work. I got to do something. I only got 4 years before the next election, and I got to prove that I'm the person who should be here. So I asked to speak to the Minister of Health at that time, was Dennis Timbrell. And the message that came back from his office, because in those days the ministers were up here and the MPs were the peons down here. And once I got down there, I soon realized that an MPP, his power wasn't that strong in actual fact. The ministers made the decisions, and the Premier endorsed them, or the Premier wanted something, and whatever the minister was in charge of that department made sure it happened. Anyway, so I couldn't see Timbrell. So I met his aide, and she was a girl from Sudbury. Her last name was Beauluc, and she worked for Dennis Timbrell in his office. One day I was in the ante-room before you go into the main legislative chamber. And so I went up to her and I said, I've got to see Dennis. I mean, I got to get a cancer treatment center for Sudbury. And she looked at me and she said, Jim, she says, you're never going to get a cancer treatment center for Sudbury. And I said, what do you mean, never? She said, we've just finished spending millions of dollars on bringing Sunnybrook and Princess Margaret up to the level that they are going to meet the mandate of the OCTRF, which was the Ontario Cancer Treatment and Research Foundation. And their mandate is to continue the centralization of the treatment of cancer in Toronto. It's a policy. And we've spent all this money. It's not going to happen.
What'd you do?
Well, here's what happened. About 3 weeks later, the Premier took the necessary steps to have various new MPPs who showed promise to be made into what they call parliamentary assistants.
Secretaries, isn't it?
Actually, they call them parliamentary assistants. Now they call them secretaries.
A lot of feedback.
Oh yeah? Too much? Okay. So anyway, parliamentary assistants. So I became the parliamentary assistant to guess who? Dennis Timbrell. Well, I had a nice big office next to his. I'll tell you, they got big offices down there. But he wouldn't budge. He wouldn't budge. But he said, what I'll do, Jim, is, he said, I'll make sure that you can meet and talk to the Bill Meakin, Dr. Bill Meakin, who is the head of the Ontario Cancer Treatment and Research Foundation, and Dr. Bush, who is head of, I think it was Princess Margaret. Because those are the two key guys in cancer, and you can talk to them about it. And there are things that can happen in Sudbury that would be beneficial. You know, we do send doctors up there to examine patients and to make recommendations, and there are some other things that could happen. So what happened was, I called those two men, and I said, I'd like to meet with you. And they said, oh, fine, we'll come down to your office and talk to you. So they did. And after our meeting in the office, which was just, chatting and talking about possibilities, we went over to the Sutton Place Hotel, very elegant hotel. And in the dining room, had lots of silver and things like that. And I couldn't help looking around the room at how elegant it was, but this was not Sudbury. And certainly the people who sat there and ate there didn't represent Sudbury and probably didn't know that Sudbury ever existed, nor would care. And these two gentlemen are the two gentlemen I have to convince of something. But I knew really, if anything was going to happen, it would have to happen because of the Minister of Health and the Premier of the province. I knew where the real power was, and where the decisions were being made, ultimately. So we had a nice long conversation and lunch, and then they offered me a registry. They said, we're going to give you a cancer treatment office that will take care of the registry of cancer patients throughout the North. Imagine that. I mean, I was, you would have thought I would have, got really angry, but I didn't. I told them, because I knew that these people would have to give in the end, but I wasn't going to be anything but firm, polite, insistent, but not get angry. Because anger, as you know, is it's the next thing before defeat. So what was I to do? 3 years went by. Almost 3 years. Still no cancer treatment center. And I had my office calling them about, the improvements that were needed and all the rest, but I wasn't getting anywhere. And then the Premier announced that he was not going to run again, that he was going to step down. And this meant a leadership convention. At that time, my brother had become the Northern organizer. He knew every person who was of any, had any power or influence in the party within Northern Ontario municipalities from one end to the other. So he was the Northern organizer, and I at that time lived in the village by the Grange near the Ontario College of Art, and he lived in the building next. And we would spend time together talking about the things we were ambitious about and cared about. And the minute the election was called, guess who just happened to be the Minister of Health? No longer Timbrell, he'd moved on. The Minister of Health at that time was Larry Grossman. Who was the parliamentary assistant to Larry Grossman? I was the parliamentary assistant. And when Larry came in as a minister, I immediately began cultivating him. But I didn't have to cultivate Larry, really, because I just back up a little. When I was still mayor of the city of Sudbury, he was the Minister of Tourism, Larry was. And he came to Sudbury, and he announced a few things. And that evening, we met in my office. And thereafter, Larry and I got along famously. He liked me, I liked him. Well, why wouldn't I like him? He was shrewd, he was smart, he was ambitious, and he was going to go places. And he did. So anyway, just to make a long story short, The thing I like most about Larry, Larry would go to a cabinet meeting and he would know as much as any of those others who were ministers knew about their portfolios. He was right up on everything. And they all, they knew he was ambitious, and many of them didn't like him because of his naked ambition, but he's a shrewd cat. And he was my friend. So, here's what happened. I went to John. I said, John, we're going to support Larry Grossman for leader. And chances are he'll be the premier. But you're going to have to do something that's very hard. But don't worry, because we're going to win, and one way or the other, you'll get ahead. Because you're going to have to step down as Northern Organizer, because you can't be the organizer and be working for Larry at the same time, because then you'd be at cross purposes with everybody else who's running. So my brother agreed. So that meant that I knew that I could deliver the North. And so I went to Larry in his office the next day. I went in and I said, Larry, I see you're running, and I think you're the best man, and you're going to be the premier, and I'm going to help you. Well, he was so happy. I said, my brother and I will deliver the North. We will be your Northern organizers. We'll see that you get those Northern delegates, which we did. In the long run, we did do it. Well, I was very pleased. And he wasn't a very tall man. He was about maybe 5'1", 2 at the most. And he was on the other side of this big desk. And so then I got up, I turned around deliberately, walked towards the door. Halfway to the door, I turned around, I looked back at him. But Larry, there's one thing I want to ask for. What I ask for is a cancer treatment center for Sudbury. He jumped out of his chair, put his arm out like this, grabbed my hand, and he said, you've got it. 2 months later, look up, I'm standing on the tarmac at Sudbury Airport. There's a distant dot in the sky. It's a King Air, the official rental plane of the Ontario government, and I'm standing there on the tarmac, and my brother's with me, and we're where they bring the planes in for guests, not the main terminal. Plane comes up, 2-engine plane, you know, and the door swings open, and who steps down the stairs? Who's standing there? Bill Davis. And he comes down the stairs and he looks at the two of us and he said, well, he said, great big grin on his face, the Gordon boys. And he shakes our hands. And we go into Sudbury and we're there for an announcement. Everybody's waiting. And I sent you the picture. You saw the picture. The picture is, in the picture, there's Maureen Lacroix, Bill Meakin, Dr. Demera, John Gagnon, and Bill Davis, and I'm standing next to Bill Davis, and I got the biggest guy. It's beatific. I've got that. I never forget that picture because I look so happy. I mean, it's just like, you know. And then Davis takes the shovel, puts it in the ground. That's it. The decision's been made. There will be a cancer treatment center in Sudbury. And it took them a number of years. Then, of course, we ended up losing the election. We were out. And then eventually the Liberals kept the promise, and there it was. That's how you get things done. Now, the way you get things done is, first of all, don't make enemies. But if you do make enemies, make sure you embrace them and never say anything negative about them in public. You might whisper it in your wife's ear, but outside of that,
Now,
and
Jim,
be nice.
I wrote a column about you, and the first thing I said was that you pick an enemy 6 months before the election, and you always did.
Oh, yes,
And it
but
was
that's,
very successful.
yes, of course, but that's a different kind of enemy. I'm talking about people who are councillors, people who are fellow MPPs and cabinet ministers and so forth. But that's
Okay,
how
we're
you
running
do
out of
things.
space. We're running out of
I know.
battery and everything else.
I know.
Jackie, you got some questions?
Yes. So one thing that I'm interested in hearing you talk about is that you mentioned social justice sort of at the beginning of this. And
Yeah.
I think usually, I mean, at least these days, we don't really associate the Conservative Party with social justice agenda. So I'm curious how you like reconcile those two.
Well, I can quite easily, actually. We're all human, and we all have hearts, and we all know deep down that if we're going to do the right thing in life and accomplish what we're meant to accomplish here, we have to pay close attention to what I call the common good. There's a common good. There's a natural law out there. It's not religion. It's the natural law that says this is how people should be treated. This is how you should live your life. I'm a red Tory. I am fiscally very conservative because I believe that if you don't take care of the dollar, it's not going to take care of itself. But on the social side, I'm a very, very strong social-minded person. And I have to say that while it's true that I am that way, and I'm still a red Tory, but I have to tell you, when I did go down to Queen's Park in 1981, I certainly found out in that caucus that I was the lefty. Many of them felt I was a New Democrat, that I wasn't a conservative. I heard that more than once. But you can be a conservative without, well, conservatives, that doesn't mean you don't have any idea what social justice is.
And also, can I get you to, I mean, we talked about a lot of the things that you've done in great detail, but could I get you to do a more succinct sort of like restatement of things? Like just a list, maybe?
Well,
So some of the things just to,
yeah, I know.
because we're cutting this.
No,
way.
I know that. But
So-
I didn't even tell you about how we got the medical school. That's why we're sitting
I
here.
think that should, I think it would be great. if
But
you
that's a
could say,
story.
It is a story, and I was gonna say my wife, my daughter
Yeah.
keeps telling me that
Yeah.
I'm asking, writing stories, because I interview and then I
I
write
know.
about the individual.
I know.
But we're doing this for
Yeah.
video, so as you talk about being an activist, you're
Yeah.
talking about, there are 3 or 4 things that were really important, and this is what
Okay.
we did to get it, and we'll intersperse
Okay.
some of the other things.
Well, okay. And cut me off if I'm going too long. Let's talk about the medical
So,
school.
Okay.
yeah, I just need you to sit back. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, let's talk about the medical school.
But just could you restate some of the things that you already said, like the cancer center and the other thing, just so we have sort of like a shorter. Just like I did this and
Yeah, but you know something? I hate that word "I,"
yeah.
because the only reason that those things happened was because there were people in the community who had worked on these on these things, like cancer as an example, for years and years. But I was just lucky to have been given the opportunity to be able to close the circle. There was nobody to close that circle, and so you might say that I was a closer. If you want something closed, you call Jim Gordon, and if he says he's going to do it, he's not going to drop it. He will continue to do it till the last ounce of blood is in his body. That's who I am. And I do it out of conviction. I do it out of my value system. That's where I come from. Now, so you want me to talk about, okay, well,
I understand the problem.
Yeah, it's a real problem, but well, we have a little bit of room left on this tape. So let's just do this. I just want to go over the medical school thing.
Right. I'm just saying I need like
A list. Okay, well, Cancer Treatment Center.
right. Could you just say like some of the things that I've been involved? Not that I did this, but like that I've been involved in, or so like some of the yeah.
Well, okay. I think if I'm trying to think of just some of the main things, there's so much. The Cancer Treatment Center is definitely a big one in my mind. The medical school are fundamental to everything that we believe through 2001. You know, that was the whole idea. And the continuous mining and the mining industry, the mining machinery developments that occurred here, they were all part of it. And I would also say that I think that from a fiscal point of view, I was, you'll get a kick out of this, Mike, I was very responsible. Some might argue otherwise, but it's so funny, you know, to walk into the mayor's office these days and he talks about his projects, and then it says, you know, Jim, we can do this because you left us so much fiscal room. And I think to myself, what?
What was your favorite part of being the mayor of Sudbury?
Oh, the favorite part of being mayor was meeting people, talking to people, because I like people. Like, I get up in the morning and I have to leave the house and go and talk to a clerk in a store someplace, just because I like hearing people's stories. I was almost late for your this meeting we had this morning because I met an Italian gentleman downstairs where the elevators are, and he wanted to tell me his story about why he was coming to City Hall to get a building permit, because he was a retired Italian contractor. I took the time, of course, to listen to him and everything, because I am interested in what they have to say. And that's why I can do what I do, and that's why I can do what I did do, because I understood people, and I know what motivates them, and I always knew pretty well what the populace was thinking.
Do you think that in itself was a form of activism? Just listening to people?
Yeah, listening to people is a form of activism, especially if you're somebody who relates them to your own values and to the values out of which those people are talking.
We've both been a part of this city for 40 years, and it strikes me, you might rephrase this, but you were able to take the energy of this community, which is extraordinary, coming out of its labor roots, its pain.
I know.
But somehow it stands up, and you were able to galvanize that spirit. I just wondered if you could speak to that.
Well, let's put it this way. When the medical school was first being looked at by the board of Laurentian University, they were doing it based on a report that had been commissioned by Elizabeth Whitmer to be done to see whether the present medical schools in Southern Ontario had the capacity or could develop more doctors. And she chose a doctor by the name of Dr. McKendry. The Dr. McKendry's report just happened in one sentence or two sentences to mention, in reference to the North, that thought had been given, should be given, to perhaps doing something in the North, something along those lines. The medical schools saw no problem in adding, say, 25 seats to each one of their schools, their medical schools, and they could take care of it. And it would be less costly than the North. And the North wasn't being thought of in a serious way at all as a result of the McKendry report at Queen's Park. But There was a man by the name of Nick Farku who came to me and said, Jim, you're the only one who could make this happen because you understand how politics works in the province and in this city. And I listened and I said, okay, I'll think about it. And I wasn't going to do anything about it because I knew if I took it on as a project, it would consume most of my life. I had a city to run, it wasn't my job to create a medical school. But then Ted Callahan was my counselor who really believed in me. We talked about it. He talked to me, what do you think, Jim, a month later? And I said, I don't know. He said, oh, no, you should. He said, I think you could do it. Well, I decided I would. I brought a motion to council that we support Laurentian with their endeavor and the Lakehead with their endeavor, and it passed. And then I went to the region. I went to SRDC for about 2 months. Nothing was happening, so I decided I've got to do something about this. And I knew the way to make it happen. And here's the way to make it happen. I knew that in the north we didn't get things from Queen's Park because we were too self-centered in various communities. And we showed our self-centeredness in being jealous if somebody else got a grant and we didn't get the grant. And a medical school was huge. And who would see it? Lakehead, Thunder Bay, Sudbury, but the rest of the north would see that as something that Sudbury's going to get it all, and Thunder Bay, but we won't get anything. And so in order to get a medical school, you have to unite the north. So I knew I could do it, because when I first became mayor again, when I became mayor in 1991, what I did is I called David Hamilton, the mayor of Thunder Bay, and I said, look, we got to get together, because I think if we have the major cities all together, we can do more on projects that are over and above our own municipality, and that affect the north that way. So I set that up in 1991. In the year when after Farku talked to me and everything, and after I got the motion through council, I called a meeting of the large city mayors of Northern Ontario. I called Dr. Tesson. We went down with a purpose of convincing them that they should put on a united front for a medical school in the north. At the end of that meeting, they said yes. Okay? That was huge. Once I had that, I knew I had it. Why did I know I had it? Well, because I sat beside Michael Harris for 6 years. I know that man, and he knew me. But what I knew about Harris, he had just spent, let's say 3 or 4 years of his mandate just cutting everything to ribbons in Ontario and causing a lot of pain and suffering. It was probably one of the most hated premiers that this province has ever seen. But I know one thing about human nature, and that is we always deep down want to do something about the place we came from, because that's where we're going to be remembered. You're not going to be remembered in Toronto or Windsor or in London, but if you create a medical school when there's a crisis of Sudbury alone of 15,000 people without doctors, no doctors in the rest of the north as well, a lot of suffering and pain, and you can put a medical school in, you've made it. And he did. And then, to me, it was good enough to call me up and say, Jim, I want you to be the chairman of the implementation committee to set that school up with its governance committee and its budget, etc. That's how that happened. The reason it happened that way, again, what it goes back to, is knowing how people think, how they feel, and also where values are in people. And I knew that about Mike, because I'll tell you something else about Mike. and I don't mean this to be in your film, please. I attended Mike's father's funeral when I was mayor and he was premier. And afterwards we went back, of course, to his parents' house. But when I heard how his father had treated him, the person who gave the eulogy about the father proceeded to tell how hard he'd been on young Mike. His father was one of these real hard-ass, tough guys and no sympathy for anybody. And that's why Mike's such a hard man. He's trying to emulate his dad.
Jackie?
Can you say, just do your name again with a bit more of an introduction about yourself? So like I was,
That's okay.
like you were the mayor and also a member of provincial parliament.
Okay.
Can I get you to sit back?
Oh, I'm
a bit?
sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Sorry about that. My name is Jim Gordon. I spent 17 years as the mayor of the city of Sudbury. And I was an MPP at Queen's Park and cabinet minister and a Red Tory and proud of it.
Go right ahead. You got another question to get him to say something that he said in a slightly different way? You go ahead.
Yeah,
We're never going to see him again, so let's get it.
Okay.
I'm just, I'm gonna have a hard time editing because
I know.
it's so much, but I really want to get all these great things that you've been
Yeah.
a part of in there. So if there's any way we can work on just having like a just a sort of a summary list, just as a.
Where's my book? Did I bring that book up? Did you see a hardbound book?
Don't move, I'll look around.
There's a hardbound book here. And I just jotted a few things down.
I don't think you brought it in.
Here's some, let me give you
Yeah,
some,
like, you know, so much, you know. I closed dams when I shouldn't have, you know. Conservation Authority wanted me run off out of town.
Right, but just the things that we've talked about today. So sort of like, I'm just thinking of like
Just the, well,
yeah, so
Oh,
if you
I'm
could just
sorry.
Say,
So,
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
so, but in a succinct way, not saying I, but saying this community, and we did this.
Okay.
And I was such a.
yeah, like the things I've been really proud of to be a part of are
Okay,
having
okay.
a cancer foundation at medical school.
yeah, okay, fine. Okay, I got you. Yeah. Okay, that's great. Okay, let me see. Well, what makes me really proud of Sudbury, and all of us together, we now have mining machinery development in Sudbury. We have a cancer treatment center. We have medical school. We have Science North. Oh, yeah, that's true. Science North was another big one. We have Science North.
We're
Regreening.
gonna do this
Oh,
again.
yeah.
We're gonna do this again.
Okay, yeah.
Okay,
I
so
get it.
we're
Okay, yeah.
I made some lists here.
Yeah, I need a list. I mean, really do. I mean, like, it's
Just a
just,
second.
it's too much.
Here, well,
And I'm too emotional. I have to tell you. Well, you know that. You can see that. I'm too emotional. I'm an emotive kind of guy.
I'll leave it out of that range. Is it in the range or is it okay? Okay.
He's not.
Okay.
Sorry, I just can't have you moving too much. Can I get you to shift it? Yeah, that's great.
No, I'm gonna have to do this.
It'll go dark sooner or later.
Let's see.
Just if I could just have you succinctly say that, like the three things we talked about today. We talked about the medical school, the cancer, and the machinery. So if you could just say just a few things that I'm really proud of in my time. Or,
Well, okay, yeah, okay, and then it is true. Well, I'll talk about a couple more things. There are a number of things that I am quite proud that we have been able to do in Sudbury and been very successful. The regreening is a terrific example worldwide, known, and NORCAT, which has been really responsible for many projects, and also the further development of projects that never happen.
Gotta call Tim.
Okay.
Gotta call Tim.
Just the things we talked about:
That's
the
good.
medical school, the cancer, and the machinery. If I could just get you to say it, yeah.
We've done so much in Sudbury, and I'm very proud of it. The
Yeah.
the medical
Okay.
school, this, that,
Okay.
and the other thing, and we've done so many
Okay.
other things.
Okay. We have done so much in Sudbury, and I am proud of it. The medical school, the regreening, the mining industry that we have here now, the machinery side of it especially, the development of what I would call a very strong advocacy tenor in the city. There's a belief in Sudbury now that is very unusual, and that is we can do it. We have a problem, we have a project that needs to be done, we are going to do it. NeoKid's a good example, which is going to
You gotta go
happen.
back. We're getting there.
Okay, we're getting there. Sorry.
What we've done together, medical school,
Yeah,
cancer
Yeah.
research center,
yeah,
and what was the other one?
Mining machinery.
yeah.
In mining machine.
Okay.
So just let's roll
Okay.
that out. We're going to edit some of the other
Okay,
stuff in,
fine. Okay,
but we need a powerful statement
Okay.
of how this.
Yeah.
was
okay. Well, what we have done in Sudbury is truly phenomenal. We have a cancer treatment center. We have a world-class mining machinery business here. We have a mining school here. We have regreening, and we have a real strong advocacy base that's not going to go away ever.
Just add the medical school.
Did I leave it out?
Yeah. Okay. One more round, and it's like right out of the TV shows. We're just going to keep on doing it.
Okay, well, we,
Medical school.
yeah, okay.
Just the three: the mining, the medical.
Medical,
school,
mining,
and-
cancer.
okay, well, Sudbury and its citizens are a phenomenal example of making things happen. Take the medical school, the cancer treatment center, the regreening, the mining, machinery, all of that was made possible by people who had ideas and the drive and the vision to want to make it happen and to make sure that the circle is closed.
I'll take it.
Well, sorry for being so hard to be able to
No,
get
it's
along
Oh,
with.
yeah, no, it's exactly
Yeah.
the way I think. Like
Yeah.
I've made,
Yeah.
I got this whole thing. I got
Yeah.
like 50 things
Yeah,
I know that we were a part of.
I know.
But
But-
it's hard. We're editing this down. How
I
this
know.
is going to work is that I'm going to write an introduction.
Yeah.
So I'm going to mention some of these
Mhm.
other things.
Mhm.
I've
Of
known
course.
Jim, like I'm going to say
Yeah,
I've known
no.
Jim for 40
Yeah.
years, and this is some of the things involved in. And then we're going to go to the areas
Mhm.
where you're talking about the specifics of
Yeah.
how you accomplish some of
Yeah.
these things as an advocate.
Yeah.
Do you have another question you want to see to get the kind of
Yeah. I guess, did you consider yourself to be an activist before you got into politics, or has it come through your politics?
No, I think I was an activist long before I came to politics. I say that because even as a young child, only in grade 7, already I was called forward by the teachers to be the speaker, to make a speech. And if you're a speaker, you tend to be somebody who is more active and ready to leap off a cliff, maybe. And then I was also influenced very heavily by a priest whose name was Connie McKee at Christ the King Church. And he just appealed to my ideas because he really believed in life you should do as much as you can because that's the way you do what the Lord wants you to do. And I don't mean to sound hokey when I say that, but it's what I believe.
And you were a teacher.
I was a high school teacher, yeah. I was very fortunate because being a high school teacher and an English teacher, of course, I had a stage. You know, there were the plays. There was Macbeth. There was Hamlet. Romeo and Juliet. There was poetry. And I loved being able to have those students gather together in their groupings and to do the studying and the writing, and then they'd present it. And there were times when in that classroom I'd look and I would think that if only the public could see these young people expressing themselves and acting things out. Like I saw things go on in those classrooms that were unbelievable at the talent that I had the good fortune of being able to mold and to help. And that's why it was so wonderful to be a teacher.
Do you have any other questions? Madam Producer.
No, I don't think so. Can we do the intro one more time and just have you? Sorry,
No, I'll do it, but I just which
know
intro?
I know it's weird. Just the intro. Can you just say, my name is Jim Gordon. I've been a teacher. I've been a mayor of the city, and I've been a member of provincial parliament.
Yeah.
Okay.
With passion.
Okay. Well, my name is Jim Gordon. And I have been really blessed to have been a mayor, to have participated in projects like the Cancer Treatment Center, the university, the Science North, also the mining machinery business.
Sorry, I just meant, can you just say, like, I've been a teacher, I've
Oh,
been a mayor, and I've been
okay.
a member of provincial
Yeah,
parliament.
okay.
Instead
Okay.
of saying MPP, though, can you say member of provincial parliament?
Okay, I will.
Thank you.
I've been a teacher, I've been a mayor,
Oh, I
I've
know.
been an MP.
Okay, yes.
Or a member of parliament.
Okay,
and
yes.
it's-
Okay.
You poor son of a bitch.
I have been.
I'll give you another candy bar.
Well,
You
yeah,
just get
well,
this
yeah,
out.
promise.
Well,
eh?
let's go.
Okay, I have been fortunate enough.
Sorry, just my name is Jim Gordon.
Okay,
and
okay,
I've been a
okay,
teacher,
okay,
I've been a mayor,
okay.
I've been a member of provincial parliament.
Okay. My name is Jim Gordon, and I've been a mayor, a member of parliament, a father, family man, and
A teacher.
a teacher.
Okay, one more time.
Oh, shit.
Keep rocking. Here we go.
Here we go.
I've been a teacher. I've been a teacher.
You can run this on TV and it'll be a great show.
I've been a teacher.
Okay.
I've been a mayor.
Okay.
I've been a member of parliament.
Yes.
And I've loved every.
Okay, yes, okay. I've been a teacher.
My name is Jim Gordon.
Okay. My name is Jim Gordon, and I've been a teacher. I've been a member of parliament. I've been a mayor. I've been a family man with 6 daughters, and I've been very fortunate to have been a citizen of this great city.